Hello and welcome to the Time Is Now podcast. My name is Jody Albert Moss and this is episode 7. I've started making podcasts to share with people some of the experiences I've had in my own life. I've recorded these experiences in my book, The Time Is Now, which is available on my website, jodyalbertmoss.com. But I like to share some of them in the podcast. It's my belief, and it has been for a long time, that most of us are having similar experiences, have had similar experiences in our lives, but many of us have kept them to ourselves. We were afraid to share them. I know myself, I was born in 1959, so that makes me 63 now, 64. It wasn't common to talk about energies, crystals. Back in the day, back then, terms like ESP were used. They had just come out with the four-sided pyramids and were sharpening razor blades in them. So that's how long ago that was. So we kept it to ourselves. We didn't want to be seen as strange. Most of the time, we couldn't talk about it at work or with our families because we would have been isolated. So we kept it to ourselves. And many times we kept it to ourselves and paid a price for that. I know myself, the early years, from as far back as I can remember, I can remember some things back when I was like, I'm going to say 4 or 5. And then up, I was I thought of things differently. I wondered about a lot of things. You know, I had a microscope and a telescope at a very early age. And I wanted to know why. I remember one time, I think it was in school, they were talking about, we need to have an imagination. And I just couldn't get my head around that. I didn't know what an imagination was. I didn't know the imaginating process, so I kind of just let it go. I had my own way of seeing things. So until I hit pretty much grade 7 and 8, I was pretty open. But then I realized things were happening to me that weren't happening to everyone else. So I bottled up. I clammed up. I just kept it all to myself and didn't talk about it for a long time. Until I was probably later teens, and then some things had started showing up in books, and I did a little bit of reading and understood that, hey, others were having similar experiences. So there was a little window of opportunity for me, I would say from 17 to 20, and I did some reading, did some practicing, made my first pendulums out of wood, paraffin wax, and nylon cord. So I did a little bit of experimenting with pendulums, some divination, a little bit of ESP. It wasn't much available to us, but I always wondered about, hearing animals' thoughts or maybe hearing people's thoughts. So I did kind of explore that. But then from 20 on, I clammed up again because that's the time when I got a job, had to pay some bills, had to pay for an apartment, all the linear world things. That really had an effect on me. And it wasn't again till I was in my late 20s that I started experimenting. A lot more was open to us and available. Bookstores were carrying more books on psychics, tarot card reading, crystal ball gazing. There was some more information coming, but this was all before the internet and all that kind of access. So it was basically books, and if we went to maybe a spiritualist church or we found a meditation group, which were few and far between, but it was a resource that we could search out and get some information. So when I was in my late 20s, that's when I got introduced to crystals, quartz crystals. I didn't even know what they were. I had gone into a store in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and it was a lapidary shop. I didn't even know what a lapidary shop was, but they had crystals. So I was just intuitively drawn to a crystal. And this crystal was about 3 inches long. Couldn't really see right through it. Parts of it were clear, but it just kind of spoke to me. So I bought it. And back in that time, it was worth $85, which was a lot for a crystal. But I had to have it, and I have it still to this day, and I wear it. And I was told it came from Arkansas, or Arkansas, I think it was, and it had a very high silver content. And I always resonated with silver because I was a member of the spiritualist church at the time, and through some communication, I found out that silver resonates at the Christ vibration, so I liked silver. So I bought the crystal, and that was my first big step. And then I was able to get more crystals because there wasn't really shows like there are now today. There were just shops. Generally, a bookshop sold some crystals and stones, and that's where you got them. So I made my first power rod when I was about 28, 29. And a power rod, the one that I made, was a copper rod, and I wrapped it in leather, and I glued a crystal in the end. And the theory behind it, from what I had began to understand, was the copper would accumulate particles, really fine subatomic particles, in the handle of the rod. The leather would insulate me, and the crystal, by its very nature, crystals amplify and project. The crystal would project the crystals that were forming in the handle of the copper and project it out through the tip of the crystal. So it's basically a little particle accelerator. That's what I believed. So that's when I made my first one, my first power rod. And I played around with it and did some experiments with it. And again, I have it to this day. And I encourage you that if you make anything, keep it. You never know. As we develop, our frequencies change and our vibrations change, and different information comes to us, and we'll have different uses for the things we had made earlier on. And then as things would go, I kind of shut it off again, went into hiding for several years, got caught up in linear life. Just the way it is, you know. I understand we all have things we need to do. Especially in this day and age, things are getting a lot harder. So it is challenging to make time every day or every couple days to do our spiritual work. But I just want you to understand that we're all pretty much the same. But we do need to be mindful. Be mindful of what's going on around us and take some time every day. If you're called to make something, make it. Don't over-research it. I encourage people to listen to their inner voice before they go and buy a bunch of books or take a bunch of courses or do a lot of online researching. It's better to listen to your inner voice and put the prototypes together. The first models. You can always change it. But the key is that you've listened to some information coming to you. You've acknowledged that information is there, and you've acted upon it. That is a huge process. Once you do that, once you start, more information comes to you. I've made some pretty elaborate power rods, I call them, Arcturian crystal power rods, and they all incorporate brass, inner materials, wood, programmable sands, colors. It's all there, and some are pretty intricate. But it all starts with me getting a piece of copper or a piece of wood and making that first cut. Until I make that first cut, I have no idea what else is coming. It comes to me in stages. So I start, a little more comes. I'll maybe make a sketch. I do use my pendulum, which is dowsing, I guess. You could call it dowsing, or radiesthesia, a sensitivity to rays. A pendulum gives you a visual, so I can get yes and no responses. And that helps me refine the designs I'm working on, because I get so caught up in it, so out there that a pendulum helps ground me. So that's what I do, I start, I make the first cut, and then the colors come, the materials come, the shapes come. Should I use coils, types of crystals, etc., etc. So these little podcasts, I'm going to try and keep them shorter because the information coming to me from, you could call it guides, high dimensional beings that give me information, they want me to share with you through my experiences and what works for me. So I just want to give you short podcasts. You can pop on, have a listen, and it's my hope that something I said, one word, a sentence, strikes a chord in you, resonates, and you go, wow, I'm going to try that. That is extremely powerful. If we all do that, if we all have that desire to try, to know that we can, things start shifting. We'll change the world from what it is now to something better. But we need to start working with these energies. And that doesn't mean you have to make something out of copper. If you're a musician, use music. If you're a baker, bake. Painter, paint. Whatever you're comfortable with. Singer, use your voice. Don't put restrictions on it. Don't put yourself in a box. The important thing is receive the information, acknowledge that it's there, and act upon it. That's the key to success. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a fantastic day.